Welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Hanin Farah and I'm an associate professor at the Department of Transport and Planning at Delft University of Technology and co-director of the Traffic and Transportation Safety Lab. TU Delft is a partner of the AfroSAFE project, and within this project we are leading work package 7, which is capacity building. And this series of webinars that we are organizing is part as well of this AfroSAFE project. Today's webinar is with Professor Fred Wegman, who is an emeritus professor in traffic safety in Delft University of Technology, the Netherlands. Before moving ahead and start with the webinar, maybe a few words about the AfroSAFE project for those who join us for the first time. So AfroSAFE is a Horizon Europe project that mostly aims to advance the safe system approach, safe system way of thinking and operation within the African countries. Within this project, we address all the pillars of the safe system approach, but we focus also on two most particularly areas, which is capacity building and the safety of vulnerable road users. And within also this project, we have the AfroSAFE Academy, which was established as part of the project to provide mostly a platform for researchers and practitioners to network and exchange knowledge and experience within the field of road safety research and education. Within the AfroSAFE Academy, we have different activities as illustrated in this slide. So we organize scientific events. We also provide information on funding opportunities, publications that are key publications in the area, and also develop road safety courses. Would be interesting to announce that later this year in June, on the 12th and to 14th of June, we will have the first AfroSAFE conference in Tanzania. If you want to receive more information about the conference, you can scan the QR code and go to the website where you will have the main theme, which is knowledge-based traffic safety management for African countries, and the list of topics and the events that is organized there. Before I go ahead and introduce Professor Wegman, I would like also to ask you if you have questions during the webinar to please type your name in the chat, and later after the webinar we will call you depending on the order of the names to state your question. So just it's enough to put your name there and later you can unmute and ask your question. Professor Fred Wegman, we're happy to have you with us here today. So as I mentioned, Professor Wegman is an emeritus professor in traffic safety since 2014 at Delft University of Technology, the Netherlands. He's also one of the founders of the safe system approach in road safety. He acted for many years as the managing director of SWAV, which is the National Scientific Institute for Road Safety in the Netherlands. He's also involved in different international organizations. I was just checking the list and it's too many to mention them, so I will mention just a few examples. Like the European Commission, the European Transport Safety Council, the FIA Foundation, the World Bank, and the World Health Organization. He worked in the field of road safety for many years and carried a lot of training programs in more than 25 countries worldwide. He's one of the founders of the Delft Road Safety courses, which targets to develop capacity building in low and middle income countries. He has a vast experience in supporting and training professionals from these countries to develop and implement evidence-based road safety strategies and action plans. He was awarded a royal order by the King of the Netherlands, officer of the Order of Oranje Nassau. And just to let you explain a little bit about this award, it's granted for long-standing meritorious service to society. So Professor Wegman, we're happy to have you again with us here, and I would like to give you the floor to share your presentation. I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you very much for introducing me. Can you see my screen? Not yet. Here.
Not yet. I think it's coming. Yep, yes. Now.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Anine, for this nice introduction. And thank you for having me in this series of webinars. It's my pleasure to be here. And you invited me to talk about recent publication we produced. And here you have the full title of that publication, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. We check why it's not working. I start again. Okay. So, sorry for that. So this is the publication we produced. It's published by the end of last year, and now it is published in Accident Analysis and Prevention. And here you see the full title: Safe System Approach for Cyclists in the Netherlands Towards Zero Fatalities and Serious Injuries, ? And that question mark is relevant. This is part of a special issue for AAP, and this special issue is focused on exploring the relationship between crash causation, countermeasures, and policy. More specifically, it tries to relate crash causation to road safety measures and programs. You have the editors, David Shinar and Ezra Hauer, and they drafted a very nice editorial, far more than you expect from an editorial. So I recommend you to have a look. And these two professors came up with this model. Perhaps you understand it. It's not completely clear to me, but what it tries to describe here is that there's not a kind of a linear relationship between causes, countermeasures, and policy. And you see here that the relationship between causes and countermeasures is somewhat complicated. However, all arrows are in the same direction from left to right. But if you have a look at the arrows from policy to countermeasures, they are counterintuitively the wrong direction. But I like the idea that it's not simply that the best countermeasures you can think about based on research, so to say, will end up in policy, and you see why that is the case, and you have several impacts on the final shape of policy by these factors. But as said, this editorial is interesting, and I recommend everyone who can have a look at that to study that, because it is somewhat mind-provoking. I don't understand why it's not really working, but okay, here we go. What I try to do today is to introduce you to the research methodology that we use. So Paul Schepers and myself drafted this document, and I think for everyone in the room with a research background, it's of interest to learn a little bit about the methodology we developed and used for this research. I try to explain why good road safety data are so essential for our work. If you don't have good data, it is not very easy to arrive at valid and reliable conclusions. And what I hope is that you think about the approach to transfer it to what I call African setting, to see whether you can apply this as well. And what you miss here is that I'm not going to talk too much about potential solutions for road safety problems in the Netherlands, and you completely understand why that is the case. My assumption was, and is, that there are not too many newcomers in road safety in Europe, meaning that I'm not going to talk about the fundamental issues like I drafted here, a couple of them. So I hope you are somewhat familiar with these road safety issues. These are the 3 research questions that we formulated for this research. First one is why the implementation of the Dutch safe system approach was relatively unsuccessful for cyclists. And the question coming then is, does the safe system approach present enough opportunities for substantially reducing the number of casualties? And how to reach 0 in 2050? And how qualitative information can be used when developing policy. So these were the 3 research questions we asked ourselves right at the start of this study, and I'm coming back to all 3 at the end. The Dutch safe system approach. I hope you are somewhat familiar with that. And if you're not really, then I have here a reference in a nice book from Sweden, the Vision Zero Handbook, and perhaps you have seen that one, together with my colleagues Letty Arts and Peter van der Knaap. We drafted a chapter on safe system in the Netherlands, and those who are interested, please have a look. Second piece of information is on the effects of implementation. So we implemented safe system ideas for many, many years, and we evaluated the impact of implementation. We covered the period 98-2007, and Wendy Wijmers and myself published on that. And there you can read the effects of implementing sustainable safety, as we call that in the Netherlands. That is the Dutch version of safe system. And you see the results. And what is striking immediately is that we were able to assess effects on fatalities and not on serious injuries at that time. And I come back to that as well, because that was very relevant for our article. Please have a look at this graph. On the horizontal axis, you have time, vertical axis, you have road fatalities. And I made this graph using data from bicycles and car occupants. And here you can see that in the period starting the introduction of safe system, there was an enormous reduction in car occupants. You can see it here. And you can see that the success of fatalities is pretty modest if there's any reduction to be observed here. And the question is, why is that the case? Why we have hardly any improvement on cyclists and we have such a considerable improvement on car occupants? And what you see as well is that in the last decade, the Dutch are not making a lot of progress. And even the last couple of years are not very promising, to be optimistic. Okay, this is the difference we observed, and we are going to try to understand what happened. What we found out as well, so in the some 10 years ago when we did an evaluation on that, that the number of serious injuries decreased less than the number of fatalities. And we were able to carry out that type of research because we were able to link police data with hospital data at the time. That was not the case before. So when we developed SAFE system, we were not able to use data on injuries. So about 10 years ago, we were starting doing that, and then we were able to figure out what was the progress in the development in injuries. And what we concluded some 10 years ago was, okay, the number of serious injuries is less than the number of fatalities. And we ask ourselves, why is that the case? And there are two main explanations given in that report. And the first one is that in SAFE system, lowering impact speed is a key element. So we try to reduce driving speeds and impact speeds. And as we know that if you do that, the impact on fatalities is higher than impact on injuries. And if you try to understand that, go to the power law of Björn Nielsen from some time ago, and then you understand that. And second thing that we learned is that the far majority of these serious injuries in the Netherlands were bicyclists. And what we learned as well, that we did not focus on all their crash types. So to be honest with you, we forgot a part of the problem to address in SAFE system. And I come to that in a minute. Cyclists in the Netherlands are very important. It's a country of cyclists. There are more bicycles than inhabitants in the country, meaning that a few people own more than one bicycle. And it is important when it comes to model shift or shape. And can see here that about a quarter of all trips are cycle trips. So it's important. What we can see these days is that we can observe a growing variety in the types of bicycles. And we observe more e-bikes, especially from elderly people. And to illustrate my point that this is a key problem, here I have the figures on the share of cycling in fatalities and injuries. 40% of all road fatalities are cyclists these days, and 70% of the serious injuries are cyclists. So this is a major component of the Dutch traffic safety arena. And as said, we are able to do this type of statements because we are able to link police and hospital data. This is not an easy task at all to do that, but I recommend all the countries trying to include serious injuries in their activities not to rely on police data, but to work in the linking on police and hospital data. And last but not least, fatalities and injuries. These are elderly people. So 85% is over 50 years of age, and half are older than 75, meaning that a lot of these elderly are cycling and not using the car or whatever, walking. So this is setting the scene a little bit. I talked about cycling and I talked about cycle facilities. The country is full of a lot of cycle facilities, and I have here photographs illustrating that. And on top right, you see the variety of vehicles using cycle tracks. A fat bike, left under, you see cyclists as well. A roundabout with a cycle circuit around it. So you see these cycle facilities everywhere, and some are safer than others, and we know a lot about that. But be assured that there are a lot of cycle facilities all over the country. When I was young and I rode my bike on a rural road, there was hardly any cycle track. If you have main rural road these days, almost 100% are cycle track, meaning that on these roads with a speed limit of 80 kilometers per hour, there are no cyclists anymore. And that was by building all these separated cycle tracks on the rural roads. But you see even more when you see them inside built-up areas. Then you may think that the cyclist problem, road safety problem of cyclists is mainly related to the collisions between cars and cyclists. That is not the case. When we see fatalities, then 55% of these crashes are in a collision with the motorized vehicle. And I would say that this phenomenon is well addressed in the safe system approach. But on the other hand, we learned that when it comes to seriously injured casualties, then it's not the majority, by far not the majority. It is only a small 20% related to collisions between motorized vehicles and cyclists. And I have to admit that this is not really well addressed in the safe system approach. And it's my idea, and of many people in the Netherlands in the meantime, that we have to improve that. And having said that, I have a warning for all those people who are working with KSI, as many people from the UK, for example, are doing. So they combine killed and seriously injured. And I learned from this type of information that it is not very wise, but because it is adding up apples and pears, because there are different types of crashes and different type of backgrounds of these crashes. So here you can see that fatalities and seriously injured casualties are coming from a different type of crash, and that it's not wise to combine them. Based on the study we did, we were able to identify the three main crash types for bicyclists. Crashes with motor vehicles, the single bicycle crashes, and the crashes with other vulnerable road users. And that was an important idea to find this and to focus on the three different crash types in this research. And if we are thinking about going towards zero long term, but nevertheless, then we can see that development in serious road injuries is not very promising. It's moving in the wrong direction. So we have to change that. And it's important to understand that the majority, something like 70% of these seriously injured casualties are cyclists. So if we would like to go to zero, we have to maneuver differently than we have done in the last 2 decades. And that leads to the question, can we hire a magician to deliver a silver bullet to solve our problem? And that more specifically, can we use the safe system approach to expect progress in reducing the number of cycle casualties? And even stronger on that, is it possible to reach zero? And I'm coming back to these questions and what our findings from this research is. I hope you are more or less familiar with this, the three components, and I've stolen this from Nielsen and Rumer some time ago. And these are basically the three wheels we can turn and to change the situation. We can try to reduce exposure to risk. We can try to reduce crash risk and injury risk. And if you would like to reach 0, one of the 3 should be 0 because you multiply them. And it's important to understand that Dutch policies try to encourage mobility by cyclists. There are reasons for that. And what we have to do then is to see if more kilometers will not necessarily result in more exposure to risk. And we can try to reduce the pressure. Then I come to an important part of the study we did, and that's on crash causation. And many of us know a lot about this crash causation, and it's somewhat confusing what you read about that. You read about the risk factors, causes, human errors, the blaming the road users. So it is not so easy to understand what we are trying to say when we talk about crash causation. What we did in Safe System was using the Swiss cheese model and introducing the important latent errors on top of what we call active errors. Active errors are by road users, and latent errors are errors in the system. So you have a couple of options to study causes or risk factors or errors or whatever you call that. You can go back to the data collected by the police. You can carry out in-depth studies for a specific part of the road safety problem, or you can carry out observational studies, such as naturalistic driving studies or riding studies. And we all use them. In this study itself, we relied on police data and in-depth studies, basically because we couldn't find too much information coming from these observational studies to help us a lot. So let me start then with 2 main misconceptions on causes or risk factors of road crashes. And perhaps you are familiar with that, I hope so, because I meet in my work still a lot of people believing these misconceptions. Road crashes have always one cause only. Sometimes that's the case, but most of the time that's not the case. There are more factors leading to the crash and the outcome. And in almost all road crashes, the human being is to be blamed. And the only response to that would be educate them better or enforce legislation more strictly, and then you can solve the problem. I don't believe in both misconceptions, and that's the reason why we developed our safe system approach. If you are interested in crash causation, don't use police reports for that, because in the assessment, the police is not looking for causation, but for culpability. Sorry. They are interested in violations of regulations or laws, and that's what they have to do. And police, when they do their job, they are looking for causes that are easy to prove in courts. And the police have no resources to investigate crashes more in depth. Police reporting is very crucial for our work, but not when it comes to their assessment of crash causation. On top of that, we have another problem, and you are familiar with that most probably, and that is underreporting. And those who are familiar with the global status report by WHO know that their countries, that many countries in the world suffer a lot from this underreporting. This is even more the case when the consequences of a crash are less severe and when no motorized vehicle is involved. And as a result, we have hardly any single bicycle crashes or bicycle crashes in the police registration, simply because they are not brought to the attention of the police, or the police has no interest in recording that. Meaning that for the work you try to do on understanding crashes with bicycles, it's hardly useful to use police information. In-depth studies are more meaningful and helpful, and we use them as well. So we use two types of in-depth studies for this. Those studies using the direct causes, and these are defined as causes observed just prior to a crash. And we use another study looking for more latent factors. And these latent factors are more looking for the system failures. And we are also looking for factors explaining why we have bicyclists falling off their bicycle or hitting a curb or whatever. And we know that we are working with balanced vehicles, and that is an inherent latent factor you have to face. And cyclists are almost unprotected. So these latent factors in our study were more important than the direct causes. And for those who have never seen the Swiss cheese model, this is how we use the reason model for road safety in our safe system approach. And as you can see, you have those different slices. And basically, we try to deal with latent errors and not to make ourselves dependent too much on unsafe actions by road users. There's nothing wrong with trying to change that, the unsafe actions, but in the safe system approach, we try to deal with the latent errors, and we try to move from left to right in our priority. So based on this, we identified 3 crash types, as I indicated, and we tried to cover the 3 components: exposure, crash risk, and injury risk. And based on that, we identified a set of countermeasures for the specific crash types. So we were not so much interested in the causes as such, but we identified crash types, and based on that, we were able to identify lines of thinking to reduce or eliminate them. And I listed them here. I invite you to go to the study and to see what we developed on these different lines of thinking. And we spent a couple of pages to illustrate that. And I'm not going into detail to that. And here you have, again, a rather traditional approach: safe infrastructure, safe people, risk increasing factors, and we have a special part paying attention to crash helmets. So coming then to answering the 3 research questions in the report. So I listed them here for you again. So talking about the first one, we learned that we didn't pay enough attention to seriously injured cyclists and not paid too much attention to 2 of the 3 main crash types when we developed the safe system. And that is the explanation of the main part of the explanation why we didn't make a lot of progress in reducing the number of cycle casualties. In our analysis, we found that the safe system principles are still very valid to address cycling safety. However, we have to add some of our attention to crashes, the single bicycle crashes, and the crashes with other vulnerable road users, such as other cyclists and pedestrians. We try to translate the findings and all the potential interventions we found to see if we can make some sort of modeling for the future and see whether with the package of interventions that we propose, whether we can reach 0 We gave it a serious attempt to do that, but at the end we failed, mainly because we lack knowledge and we lack data for appropriate modeling. And of course, we are asking for more research, but now we know better what kind of research we need to have this modeling work, this quantitative work, to do in the future. So I think we have now an agenda for cycling research, and we offered our document to the Dutch government and to SWAF, and invited them to include that in their activities on research and policy making. And I'm optimistic about that, that they are going to do that. As a matter of fact, they are now drafting a cycling safety policy document these days. And I hope we inspired the authors a little bit with our research. So then comes the question, is this of relevance for Africa? Because it's all about the Netherlands, and I promise to stay in the Netherlands, but is this of relevance? I have a major warning when it comes to transferring knowledge from one setting to another. Be very cautious when you do that, because there are so many differences. And I don't believe that it's very helpful if you simply copy and paste Dutch interventions. I don't believe in that. So there is not a kind of a cooking book, meaning that you have to develop it yourself. And secondly, I don't believe there is a kind of a silver bullet where you can solve all the problems. I don't believe in that either. And if you have a look at all the interventions we propose, and you see that there are many, many, many interventions possible and have to be selected. Is there any relevance of this study for Africa? I think it has some limited value. The conclusions, at least, have limited value. However, the methodology we developed can be applied, and the only requirement you have to meet is that your data systems are good enough. And I don't know, I'm always doubtful about data systems, but it's one more reason why you need these type of good systems to help you in guiding you in your future on road safety. We applied this approach for Dutch cyclists, but I'm confident that the same approach can be applied to every specified road safety problem in every jurisdiction. So the approach, the methodology we developed can be applied elsewhere as well. And basically you try to understand risk factors, causes, human error, and try to figure out what kind of intervention you can think about. And based on that, you can identify interventions be included in a policy. So that is mainly my message for today. And I thank you for your attention. I invite you to have a look at the document itself. I invite you to have a look at the special issue of ARP, which has been published about a month ago, I think, because this is just one example of I think the 11 or 12 studies included in this special issue. But I think it's worthwhile to have a look at it and use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred, for this super interesting talk. I would like to open the floor for questions, and I also see we already have some in the chat, so I will just go by the name. And I see the first one is a first question by Fred Ammonia. So feel free to unmute and yeah.
Right. You are a fresh breath. Thank you very much. My name is Fred for that presentation. Now, the question of transferability. that brings us to one thing, the framing of the dash phenomenon. Do we have a mathematical framing of the dash phenomenon as a dynamical system? Has that been done? Because if we have it, then that frame should help us, by us, I mean Africa, raise a few questions as we do our own framing. If the question is not clear, please let me know.
The framing of the problem in the Netherlands, of the cycling problem in the Netherlands, that's what you talk about.
Sorry, could you say that again?
The framing of the problem as I presented to you, that is what you talk about, is that right?
Yes, just the framing of the phenomenon of road safety in the Netherlands as in an interaction of the different parts, the state, market, society, how has it evolved over the years? That would be gold to us in Africa.
Yeah. Now you are talking basically about road safety management. So there is a problem, and there's a perception of the problem, and there's an organizational structure, institutional structure dealing or related to the problem. And can you learn something from us when it comes to Africa? The only thing I know about that is that there are some main ideas to be copied. For example, talking about the so-called lead agency, the strong position of a lead agency trying to mobilize and strengthen and empowering other parts of government and society to deal with road safety. That is an idea. Perhaps you know that is in the World Report on traffic injuries. I know from a study that there are many lead agencies in Africa. Are they effective? That's not for sure. Are they working? Yes. Can they improve their performance? Yes. And I would suggest that based on a strong position of a lead agency, that you have to develop your own institutional settings to make it effective. And that will be different in your country than in my country. That will be different in Sweden than in the Netherlands, or in France or the Netherlands. Meaning that you have to develop that framing and that institutional setting yourself and see how you can make that effective. And you can, of course, learn a little bit from the experiences over here, but there's not something like a copy-paste solution for you available, unfortunately, of course.
I don't want to drag the question, but I just want to say that I wasn't looking for what straight away we can gather from the Netherlands. Rather, I was first asking for a mathematical framing of the dynamics of the Netherlands so that we can look back as Africa and say, hold on a moment, are there a few things, are there a few strands we might be missing in our attempts to understand our system better? I think if you could give me some, has it been done at all? Has somebody attempted to apply mathematics to the phenomenon of road safety in the Netherlands as a dynamical system?
Yeah. So I am humble to answer this question. And what I normally do, and I hope all road safety experts from around the world are doing, is that to have a communication with you, a conversation with you, and a discussion with you. And that the result of that will inspire you to think about how to model the road safety institutional setting in your own country. So we don't expect that you can find a solution on the shelf somewhere else. You have to develop it yourself And it has to fit in your own culture and in your own structure. So let me give one example. So I worked in several African countries in the meantime. And what I learned, that knowing someone is very important in your culture. That you know someone who has a certain position and that you can help each other. That is far more important than the structure, institutional structure in my country, where it's less important. So knowing someone and helping each other is a key issue, whether it's written down in documents or not. So that's a cultural asset in Africa, I learned. And how to use that. And you know far more better than me how to use that phenomenon in your activities.
Thank you.
Hanin, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry. So I see next question, Thomas. You have the floor to ask your question.
Greetings, Hanin. Greetings, Tim. I hope you can get me.
Yes, we hear you.
Oh, okay. Thomas Mayer from Zambia Road Safety Trust. I'm a research officer there. I would love to raise 2 points from your presentation, Professor Fred. Firstly, I want to appreciate for the elaborate presentation that you have shared. Thank you so much. I just wanted to see clarity. Perhaps I'd missed this part. I think I'd walked out and then I came back. There was a part where you were saying don't use police data for accident causation, something like that. Maybe you can seek more clarity on that part. Then the second point is I'm looking at the situation here in Zambia when it comes to issues of having cycling paths. Like in the entire Zambia, we don't have cycle paths. I was looking at that beautiful picture that you were sharing. It would be nice if we would have such. But really, what I want to get is what would be your expert advice or opinion, like how we can go about to solve this problem for creating a cycle paths for cyclists here in Zambia, knowing that most of the space has been used up. Because even along the road, there are some buildings which are near the road. So even creating those space where to create those cycle paths is a major challenge. So would love to get your expert advice on this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the 2 questions. Let me start with the first one, and that is the question why I propose not to use crash causation as filled in by the police on their registration form. I give you a couple of reasons why that is the case. The role of the police when they're filling in crash causation is finding who is culpable on the road crash. So who broke the law, who made a violation, and include that. They are not really interested in all the factors on crash causation. They never fill in there was a too sharp bend, for example, or they never fill in that the verge was weak and that your tire went to the roadside and that you had a collision as a result of that. They always find something like not paying enough attention, making the wrong decision, not taking a proper distance, and all those what you can call is a violation of some piece of legislation. We, in the scene of trying to prevent crashes and prevent consequences of crashes, we are interested in all these factors that we can change in order to reduce crash risk and injury risk. And you don't find that at the police form. So that's the reason why I simply suggest not to use that cell in their form when it comes to understanding causes of crashes. To prevent one misunderstanding, in my view, police reports are very important, and the better they can be, the better we can use them, but not on this specific item. So that was my warning when it comes to causation using the police form. And if you go to the police form, then it's always 95% humans that you can find there, and you find seldomly something on vehicles. You find seldomly something on roads, and I don't believe this is the right and the full picture when it comes to causes of crashes. So that is what I do independently of the country. Don't use that item from the police form, but don't have the misunderstanding that I don't think that the police is not important. It is very important when it comes to a lot of other factors that they can fill in the crash form. So that's my response to crash causation in police. Then the second question is, do we need bicycle facilities to make cycling safer in case you are trying to promote cycling? And my answer to that is yes. And that's similarly when it comes to pedestrians, for example. I know, and I've seen a lot of cities and rural roads, by the way, in Africa, without proper sidewalks. Meaning, or if you have sidewalks, it's used differently than for walking. Economic activities, as you know. And that means that there's no separation between fast-moving motorized vehicles and vulnerable road users. And we know that if you have them in the same space at the same time, that will increase risk, and that will result in serious injuries for these vulnerable road users. So if you have vulnerable road users, you have to make separation in space or in time, most of the time in space, meaning that if you have an idea to have more cycling or walking, because you think for several reasons it is good for society, then you have to build facilities to make it safe. Sometimes people say, perhaps you learned about that, the safety in numbers theory. As long as we have more of them, it will be safer. I have my doubts whether that is the case if you don't add safe facilities, infrastructural facilities for them. I have my doubt whether that theory is true. So there's this famous graph indicating that the risk per kilometer in countries like mine and Denmark is lower than in other countries, and saying, well, here you can see there are more cyclists and it will result in lower risk. And the question is, what is the explanation for this lower risk? And my issue is, on the one hand, other road users expect more cyclists and can respond to that. But the main issue is that we add a lot of cycle facilities. Then the question is where to start, because we haven't a lot of them, and where to start. And this is what I call a step-by-step approach. Similarly, in my own country, it was not that we had just as a sudden a lot of bicycle facilities, not at all. It was developed over time, but it is a priority over here, meaning that they spend some money on it, and also meaning that year after year we invest in cycle facilities, and hopefully by doing the right things we make it safer for them. So this is a long-term answer for you. There's not a short-term or overnight solution for making it safer when you add more cycling to your system.
Thank you. I think we have a room for maybe one more question. I don't know if Gedamu, you wanted to ask a question. If not, then I move to Laxman.
Yeah. Hi, thank you, Professor Fred, for this very informative talk. So my question to you is that I have gone through your paper also, and in that you have highlighted that the proportion of single bicycle crashes is high. So do you recommend using helmets might partly solve the injuries issue?
Yes. If you are a cyclist, I recommend you to wear a helmet because if you are involved in a crash, it's safer for you. And it will reduce head and brain injuries. Now the question is how to reach that more people are wearing a helmet. And there are two options. There is, first of all, on a voluntary basis. And you can do that. You can do that and invite people saying, well, this is important and you reduce your risk and please use that. And it's interesting to observe that in my country nowadays, you see more and more elderly people wearing a helmet. So 5 years ago, there was non-existent. And now you see a growing amount of people because they are more or less convinced that it's good for their health. So that's one solution. The other solution is that you bring legislation to a country or to a city. And the question is that going to help? Yes, we have examples from other parts of the world that's going to help. And the related question is that going to reduce cycling because people hate to wear a helmet and don't cycle anymore if they are forced to wear a helmet? That might be the case. There are several people that not wearing a helmet, and we had a similar discussion when we introduced helmets for mopeds, for example, light mopeds, for example. So people stopped using them because they don't like a helmet. And for mopeds, that's perhaps not a bad thing. But for helmets, it is not to be recommended. Can we learn a lot from other countries? So can we learn from Canada or Australia? When it comes to the Netherlands, I have my doubts because the driving and riding culture is so different in this country than elsewhere. So I have my doubts, but I fully understand that Dutch authorities are not very eager to start this conversation right now. But I talked already about the new strategy coming for cycling safety. I had the opportunity to have a look at that draft document, and it's my understanding that the Dutch government is now coming with more efforts to support voluntary use of helmets in Dutch cycling, and you never know where it will end up. So I'm in favor of cycling with a helmet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Since time is almost up, I would like to take this last minute to thank our speaker, Professor Fred Wegman. Thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge with us today. I would like also to thank the attendees for joining us and only indicate that please keep an eye on the AfroSAFE Academy webpage and on the webinars, because we are planning a series of monthly webinars, so keep an eye there for the upcoming speaker, which will be announced soon. Thank you all very much, and I wish you a nice weekend, and hope to see you all in our next webinar.